Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, the Palestinian Authority has squandered over $2.5 billion in aid. Just one day after PA President Mahmoud Abbas publicly blamed Israel for his people's economic hardships, details of the PA's blatant misappropriation of over $2.5 billion was made public. Britain's Sunday Times newspaper has printed details of a leaked document from the European Union accusing the PA of corruption and mismanagement. The article detailed the findings of the European Court of Auditors, which found that the EU had little control over the $2.5 billion in aid which was allocated to the Palestinian Authority. The document cites nepotism, money laundering, fraud, and the gross misappropriation of funds. 29 government officials are currently under investigation in the PA for fraud and money laundering.
The 19th Israeli Knesset began its opening session with a promise from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel will not enter a peace accord with the Palestinians unless they recognize the Jewish state of Israel. Netanyahu told the Israeli lawmakers that the Palestinians must come to terms with Israel's Jewish legitimacy and abandon their nationalistic demands of Israel. He also noted that Palestinian leaders and media often refer to replacing the entire state of Israel rather than peaceful coexistence side by side. The premier said that while Israel is prepared to make concessions to reach a permanent accord with the Palestinians, they will not achieve statehood until they recognize Israel's right to exist.
A retired IDF colonel was attacked and brutally beaten to death by Palestinian terrorists last week. The terrorists were planning to infiltrate the home of Seraya Ofer, the former IDF Special Forces officer, when he reportedly surprised them. The terrorist overpowered Ofer and beat him to death with iron bars and axes. Ofer's wife narrowly escaped into the wilderness under the cover of darkness. She believes that the terrorists were planning to kill everyone in the house. 4 Israelis, including a 9-year-old child, have been brutally attacked by Palestinian terrorists in the last month. Israeli leaders are calling for a cessation of peace talks with the Palestinians in light of the escalation of vicious attacks on Israelis. Erin Viner has more on that story.
Israeli leaders are calling for a halt in negotiations with the Palestinians after the recent series of terror attacks. Construction and Housing Minister Uri Ariel said that the murders require a diplomatic response that includes the suspension of talks with the Palestinians, seizing the further release of terrorists, and a changed attitude toward Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. Deputy Defense Minister Danny Danon said that since the release of convicted terrorists last month, 3 innocent Israelis have lost their lives and a 9-year-old girl was wounded in Palestinian terror attacks. This is not a statistical coincidence, said Danon, adding that it is clear that the process of releasing terrorists should be halted immediately.
In his annual address to Muslims during the Hajj, the supreme leader of Iran called Israel the main enemy of Muslims worldwide. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said that Israel and the United States are to blame for the Syrian war and for the violence in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. His inflammatory statements against Israel and America were made on the eve of talks between Tehran and the West over Iran's rogue nuclear program.
A group of Iranian dissidents is claiming that Tehran is secretly relocating a nuclear facility. The National Council of Resistance of Iran claims that the hardline Islamic Republic is in the process of covertly moving the Center for Nuclear Weaponization so that uranium can continue to be enriched undetected. A representative for the group said that there is a link between the transfer and the date of the Geneva talks because Iran's regime needs to avoid the risk of visits by United Nations nuclear inspectors. More than 2,000 Eritreans gathered in Tel Aviv to mourn the deaths of 300 refugees from their nation when their boat capsized off the coast of Italy last week. The passengers were among several Somalis who were also fleeing violence in their home nations. More than 60,000 African migrants are currently residing in Israel illegally, most trying to find refuge from genocidal killings taking place in Africa. Spokesperson for the Eritrean refugees in Israel, David Damouz, spoke at the vigil, saying that our brothers and sisters found their deaths in a tragic way while trying to reach safe shores while fleeing the oppressive Eritrean dictatorship, which tortures its citizens attempting to live respectable lives as free people. He went on to acknowledge that many of his friends in Israel lost brothers and sisters, parents, and some even sons and their daughters.
The IDF uncovered a massive tunnel last week, which was dug by Palestinian terrorists. The tunnel, which begins in Gaza and ends near a kindergarten inside an Israeli kibbutz, was said to be filled with explosives and weapons. IDF officials believe that Gaza-based Palestinian terrorists were planning on using the underground passageway as an escape route after a major terrorist attack on the Israeli kindergarten. A Hamas official in Gaza told news affiliates that the tunnel was to be used to kidnap Israelis and use their bodies as bargaining chips to force the release of Palestinian terrorists in Israeli jails. Referring to the prisoner release in exchange for captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, the Hamas spokesman said it would not have been possible to free hundreds of Palestinian prisoners without the Shalit tunnel.
In response to increasing anti-Semitic attacks in the Netherlands, the government is seeking additional funds to protect its Jewish community. The ruling party is supporting a resolution to increase funds for security of Dutch Jews following a report released by Israel's Center for Information and Documentation detailing 113 anti-Semitic incidents in Holland. According to members of the Jewish community of Amsterdam, they are currently paying $1 million each year to ensure their safety.
Amnesty International has released a report stating that attacks on Christians in Egypt have increased since the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi. A representative from the human rights group told reporters that there is an unprecedented level of sectarian attacks against Coptic Christians. He said that there were over 200 attacks against the Coptic community following Morsi's removal, and that the Egyptian security forces are scapegoating Coptic Christians, further increasing the probability for violence against them.
More than 308,000 Israeli college students have begun the academic year at universities throughout the country. During a visit to Hebrew University Jerusalem, Israel's Minister of Education, Shai Peron, affirmed the commitment by government and society to making education a national priority, adding that every young person in Israel deserves the opportunity for higher education, as he wished the students and faculty a year of learning and success.
The internet giant Facebook is in negotiations to buy another Israeli startup company. According to reports, Facebook is prepared to pay between $150 to $200 million for Onavo, a data compression and research application. Onavo employs about 30 people in Israel and has made the sale contingent on the company remaining in the Jewish state. The founders of Onavo said their Tel Aviv headquarters will remain open for business and will become Facebook's new Israeli office. Facebook announced that it plans to convert the Tel Aviv Onavo offices into the first Facebook Research and Development Center in Israel.
More than 1 million Jewish children have been killed by abortion in Israel since 1948. Israel is currently engaged in a demographic war for its very survival as a Jewish state. Imagine what a difference 1 million more Jews would have made for Israel. Friends of Efrat saves the lives of thousands of children every year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Since 1977, Efrat has saved over 30,000 lives and is recognized as a world leader in preventing abortions. You can play a major role in Israel's survival now by helping us save Israel's unborn children.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in a beautiful day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is celebrated author Dr. Michael Widlansky. Michael, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the new book is out, Battle for Our Minds, and it's just blowing people away. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Okay. Well, the book is basically about how to deal with terror, and it underscores the fact that terror is a problem in here, the space between our ears. The terrorists want to conquer that space. They're not interested so much in territory, they're interested in what's here. Once they capture our minds, they can lead us by the nose. And we have to be willing to understand, we have to be willing to learn that in order to defeat the terrorist, you have to understand what the terrorist is up to, where he's coming from, what his means are, what his methods are, what his background and ideology, and then you can defeat him.
Michael, I've read part of the book and I saw that there is a message of capitulation in the West. That the West is not fighting radical Islam, it's not fighting terrorism like they should. What's the main point in that issue?
Well, as you know, it's much easier to surrender to your enemies than it is to defeat them. And the problem is, first of all, to recognize that the world faces a problem of Arab Islamic terror. There's no way to make it pretty, there's no way to say not extreme, not Islamic, not Arab. This is something that's been going on for 20 or 30 years. Most of the world's major trouble spots involve clashes with Arab Islamic forces who really want to conquer not just Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus. They want to conquer other Muslims who are not Muslim enough for them. And we have to understand what they're about, where they're getting their money, where they're getting their arms, what they plan to do, how they plan to suck up to American television, British television, French radio, get into government. This has happened, by the way, in the Obama administration, even in the Bush administration. People who are handling national security are being vetted for being pro-Islamic, pro-Arab. You're not allowed to say anymore jihadist. If you say extreme Muslim, you're out of a job. We have the head of American Intelligence, the Director of National Intelligence, DNI, Lieutenant General James Clapper, who claims that the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, is a moderate organization with franchises around the world. Well, he's not talking about McDonald's. He's talking about the world's largest terror organization, which gave birth to Al-Qaeda.
Well, that's something interesting that you bring up. We look at Egypt, and then you have Mubarak, who was the president at the time, and then he was overthrown by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a well-known terrorist organization. Yet in America, they were supporting the Muslim Brotherhood during that coup. How is this happening? Where is the moral clarity on these issues?
That's exactly correct. There is no moral clarity. It's the one thing that's clear is that things are muddy, and they've been deliberately made muddy, especially in the last 6 years. The world is actually facing a tougher problem, a more dangerous problem, 9/11 now than 9/11 then. 9/11 of 2013 and what's after that is much more dangerous than 9/11 of 2001 because the snake has split off into lots of snakes, many of whom don't have the face of Arab Islam. Many of them are converts in Britain and France and the United States. Convicts who learn their skills in American penitentiaries. You know, there are 2 million people in incarceration in the United States. A lot of them are Muslims, a lot of them become Muslim in jail, and a lot of them have the skills to become great terrorists, great in quotation marks, they learn how to break and enter, they learn how to forge documents, they learn how to put explosives together, put bombs together, liquidate silently with silencers on their arms. We have to be willing to understand what's going on and not say, oh, let's have another celebration of Ramadan at the White House. That's not the way to deal with it.
Well, Islamism is spreading around the world. It's not just an Arab issue. We see terrorist organizations in Chechnya, we see them in Africa, in Indonesia. These aren't Arabs, these are Islamists. Why is it such a spreading thing? It's not a pan-Arab epidemic, it's an Islamist epidemic.
You're absolutely correct. The problem is that the heart of the problem starts in Arabia. That's where bin Laden came from. That's where the Muslim Brotherhood essentially came from. The idea of the Muslim Brotherhood grew out of the group known as the Ikhwan in what is today Saudi Arabia, and that was picked up in Egypt. Egypt and Saudi Arabia, again, were the two major forces, people from those two countries in the 9/11 attack. And now it's spread. It is spread to the general picture of Islam. Not all Muslims, obviously. There are many good, wonderful Muslims who believe in God, who believe in being kind to their fellow man. But this warped version of Islam that says, you accept my version of Islam or I cut off your head, that version has become very popular. It's become a tribal factor again. You say, we can win, our tribe is stronger. People flock to your tribe because they want to be on the Hatfields, beating the McCoys, not on the McCoys, losing to the Hatfields.
Dr. Widlansky, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
We can defeat the enemy that is terrorism. We have to name the enemy, face the enemy, not turn our backs, because he will stab us in the back. But we can defeat him face to face, and we can win for freedom.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
It is heartbreaking to learn that there are over 40,000 abortions in Israel every year, many of which are due to financial concerns. The Efrat organization saves the lives of thousands of Jewish children each year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Please help us save thousands more.
This is Jerusalem, Israel's capital city. It's an ancient and modern treasure that is beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
After more than 25 years in prison. Dear Mr. President, I believe justice would be served by commuting the remainder of Pollard's sentence of life imprisonment. Respectfully yours, Henry A. Kissinger.
Pollard should be released. I think the time is past for Pollard to be serving a sentence given the offense.
He's been in jail for 25 years, which is 3 times longer than anybody who's ever provided classified information to a friendly country or a neutral country.
The fact is that he's been in jail for far longer than would have been warranted by anything that he did.
Dear Mr. President, I am impressed that the people who are best informed about the classified material he passed to Israel favor his release. Sincerely yours, George P. Shultz.
A former director of the CIA, Jim Woolsey, who's read the whole file, says he should be released. And Jim's a pretty hardline guy. You've had Senator DeConcini, former chairman of the Intelligence Committee, said he's read the file and he should be released. And Dennis Ross, he has said, well, the concerns that they had then are no longer relevant.
I came out strongly against clemency for Pollard when I was director of Central Intelligence, looking at the statistics of the people who stayed in prison for espionage that long. It seemed to me that it was now at the point that the punishment really was quite clearly excessive, given all of the circumstances.
Dear Mr. President, Mr. Pollard is the only person in U.S. history to receive a life sentence for disclosing classified information to an American ally. In fact, he is the only American citizen convicted of such a crime to be sentenced to more than 14 years in prison. Currently, the punishment for such a crime is set at a maximum of 10 years. Warmest wishes, Robert Wexler.
There is a pretty strong consensus about Jonathan Pollard in the American Jewish community. Rabbi Yaffe, representing the movement, raises privately with the president when the president came here. Hopefully, we will see some progress in the not-too-distant future in terms of getting clemency for Jonathan Pollard.
I think it's something that the American administration should do because it's right. It's the just thing to do.
27 years. He's paid the price for his crimes. He has expressed remorse. Enough is enough. It's time that he be let go. There is no justification that we can see for keeping him any longer. There's no cause of justice, no security interest that could possibly be served.
It's time to say enough is enough.
Anywhere else, this would be a vacation by a lake. But this is the Sea of Galilee. The wonders of Israel are beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
I never understood it. What does it mean when the prophet Ezekiel was called to prophesy to the breadth, to the four corners of this world? If you read the passages before, he had to prophesy to the dry bones of Israel. And as he was prophesying, the miracle took place. All those bones reassembled, and they built a huge army of dead bodies filled with skin and sinews and meat and flesh, but there was no life in them. And then he had to prophesy a second time to the breath of God from the four corners of this world, like the Jewish people are waving their sheaves to the four corners of this world. And I ask myself, is the Spirit of God divided into four different parts? And I thought about it and prayed about it. And then I believe God spoke to me. And he says, Jürgen, you have seen the Spirit of God in the four corners of this world. I actually saw it last year when I was in Manaus with René Terranova. 200,000 people worshiping God in a big soccer stadium in the middle of the Amazon jungle. The Spirit of God was there. We saw the Spirit of God in Bolivia in the great stadiums of Las Paz, of Pastor Alberto, when people are worshiping God and adoring and praising the God of Israel. I saw the Spirit of God this year in Finland when I was visiting the churches in Finland and felt the presence of God in those churches. I felt the Spirit of God in January this year when we visited Nigeria and Ivory Coast. And we felt how the Spirit of God powerfully was there, even to raise the dead and heal the sick. And just a few weeks ago, I came back from the East, from Thailand and Malaysia, and Brother Kirisada, I felt the Spirit of God powerfully in Thailand. I believe this country is ready for revival. And now the prophet Ezekiel is being called prophesy to the Spirit in those 4 directions. Brothers and sisters, do you know why you are here tonight at this Feast of Tabernacles? Do you know why you are sitting in this auditorium tonight? This is not because you are looking for a vacation here in this land, but this is because the Spirit of God, which is indwelling in you, He pulled you to Jerusalem for this time and for this season. And I believe when Ezekiel was prophesying to the wind in the 4 corners of the world, he actually was prophesying to the church in Latin America, to the church in Africa, to the church in Asia, to the church in Europe, to come to Jerusalem at this Feast of Sukkot and fill this city with the presence of God, with the presence of the Holy Spirit.
If you would like to purchase this inspiring message or take a look at what we have in store for you, please visit www.icej.org. And don't forget to stay tuned for our next episode.
Those who dreamed about the Jewish state, those who wrought the historical miracle and against all odds established a state, those who arrived in the homeland to their new home, those who propelled Israel forward step after step.
I have no doubt that this expanded partnership with our many Christian supporters will greatly strengthen Israel in the years ahead. And I want to thank you all for being part of that historic effort and that historic partnership. May God bless all of Israel's friends throughout the world. May God bless you.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.